It's Detina Zalli from the Leaders Show at Zalli Foundation. Today, my interview is with Gift Ostallos Siziva from Zimbabwe. Gift is a national deputy spokesperson for the Citizens Coalition for Change, a human rights defender, a PhD fellow, a Zalli Fellow, and an Obama Foundation Leaders Africa Fellow. He has been recognized on an international level for his democratic and ethical values by former President Obama himself, and he is not yet 30 years old. Good morning, Gift. It is an honor to have you with us today. I see that we have many parallels in our personal stories. Your beginnings were humble in Zimbabwe, and you had to fight tooth and nail to get an education. Can you tell us a bit about your personal story and what motivated you to become the international figure you are today?
Good morning, Detina, and good morning to our viewers. I'm privileged and honored to be part and parcel of this important platform. I grew up in the southern part of Zimbabwe, which is basically one of the marginalized regions in the country, which is occupied by the Mandela-speaking minority group in our country. But growing up, life was very difficult because I grew up from a mother who was working as a housemaid, and my father coming from the countryside to work in the urban areas as a garden boy, but finding it very important to finance education because my father believed that education is important. That's why, against difficulties, we made it possible for us to get, education. But that education became very difficult to access because of the privatization of the same, and it was made, so expensive to the reach of many. And therefore, I ended up working in a grinding mill to try and supplement my father's meager, wages and salaries. And that's how I ended up finishing my ordinary level and my A level, which then became the gateway because I became part of the top 100 students in the country in 2011 that were awarded the Joshua Nkomo Scholarship, which is basically, a scholarship funded by one of Africa's billionaires, Dr. Strive Masiwa from Zimbabwe. It's the one that then paid for my university fees to go to university. And then, of course, opened, new avenues. That's why I became so passionate about education and also fighting for and on behalf of the poor.
Were selected to participate in the Obama Foundation Leaders Program in 2022. The Foundation's mission is to inspire, empower, and connect people to change the world. The program is designed to help international leaders hone their leadership skills through coaching by other leaders and by introducing them to a network of international experts, thus capacitating them to reach new horizons as leaders in their home countries. As a recent graduate of the program, Gift, what are the most important takeaways that you have gleaned from this opportunity, and how will you implement them in your country?
Thank you very much. The Obama Foundation, unlike other fellowships that I've participated before, is tailor-made to suit one's community initiatives. So the first and foremost important lesson for me is not just about value-based leadership, but for me, it was about, community leadership, that every leader has a community, and struggle for democracy is built from community level, which is a very important thing, and an opportunity to do a project in my own community, thanks to the Obama Foundation Fellowship Program. And number two, the aspect of servant leadership, the key values that constitute servant leadership, was many times when we're in leadership, we begin to treat ourselves as leaders at the top and not necessarily understanding that we are leading and having citizens, leading that charge. So the most important thing for me was the 6 months training in and around servant leadership, the values, the principles. Number three, the aspect of appreciating cultural diversity as an important element of our leadership. The ability to be able to sync our culture and our values into the broad, society of nations and the community of nations is a very important element for me, because I was able, as the fourth pillar, to then be able to connect, because the program is able to connect us with other, leaders from across the African continent to be able to connect together, to share culture, and understand that the struggle in Ghana is our struggle, that the struggle in Ethiopia is our struggle, that the struggle in America is our struggle, because everywhere, when we're facing democratic backsliding, how do we as Democrats come together? So when you realize that the people in Burkina Faso are also struggling to realize democracy, you understand that we are together, that we are global in significance and global in essence. So for me, it's an important element of the foundation, training, and the greatest lessons that I took back home. And lastly, was also the ability for me to be trained, to get a personal mentor who is able to help you at personal level of your leadership growth. Many times we abandon the self and look at the collective, but how do we sync and make sure that the self, particularly issues around making sure that we train, we commit ourselves, we drive our own vision, we come up with our own mission, and how do we sync it with the broad national cause? For me, these were the 5 important lessons and takeaways that I got from the foundation.
Of course, education, you talked about this previously, is very, very important. But let's talk now about your plans for educating the youth of your country. You have said that a clear program of action is key for mobilizing young people who must be politically informed, and that justice and equality are at the center of all community movements. So could you tell us some of the specific actions that are being implemented in 2 of your campaigns, namely Zimbabwe Lives Matters and 1 Million Votes?
I initiated the campaign for called 1 Million Youth Campaign, which is basically targeting to raise 1 million voices for change. In Zimbabwe, the young people are the major demographic group. So those who constitute the ages of between 18 and 35 are the major demographic group, and they are the major components of the voter, population in Zimbabwe. So what we have done in this campaign is to say, how do we organize and mobilize young people from that particular demographic group to be able to exercise their right and civic duty to register and vote? So the focus of that particular campaign is to make sure that we mobilize young people, we make them come out and exercise that particular duty so that they have a government that they've entrusted for. So this is the focus of this campaign. The Zimbabwe Lives Matter campaign basically focuses on advancing social and economic justice issues in Zimbabwe. How do we group young people? How do we group women to come together and be speaking truth to power? So it's a social and economic justice campaign that is focusing on social and economic rights in Zimbabwe. How do you make sure that Zimbabwe commits to the Abuja Declaration, which says 13% of the budget must go to health? So these are some of the issues that we raise. These are some of the campaigns that we focus on. So the intention and objective is to raise awareness. The intention and objective is to empower communities so that they become champions of change in their own rights.
That's very inspiring for all of us, Gift. And it's so nice to see that you're doing all these things. And I'm sure you have a wonderful team as well who is also contributing to this. Returning to your experience at the Obama Foundation, you were recently chosen from amongst your peers to introduce the former President Obama at the first ever Democracy Forum in the New York City. As a child, did you ever dream you would meet an American president, much less receive the honor of sharing the stage with him? What are some lessons you have learned through his mentorship?
Thank you very much. In 2012, when I was at the University of Zimbabwe, I campaigned to be the student president at the university. And one of my favorite dressing was wearing a blue suit, a white shirt, and a red tie, because I was being inspired by Obama's speech that became very popular globally when he was elected from Senate to become the candidate for the Democrats. So Obama is someone who inspired me from that level as a student leader. And fortunately, I became elected into the leadership, which was very important. I began to listen to his speeches, I was reading his book and so forth. And when I joined the foundation, I never at any point, and more importantly, when I was young, it became impossible to imagine that I would at any moment in time even be in the same room with President Barack Obama, something that I never imagined. Yes, I dreams that I thought were bigger. But when I went to the foundation, we interacted with President Obama during our session. When he presented, we asked questions, and I had an interview with CNN. And after that, the Obama team approached me for me to be the one to introduce the president. I actually, shed tears because I thought that it was just a dream. I even never knew that it is something that is possible in global platforms, global politics. And when I saw that, I really, shed a tear to say, how is this possible? And I really, tried to do my best to make sure that I answered the questions that they wanted to know before that, and prepared my story to try and make sure that I do my best, and when I went to the foundation, the Democracy Forum came in, I did all the preparations and had a brief chat with the president because I thought I was going to faint, or, I had not sufficiently prepared. But the president, Barack Obama, showed me the other side of a leader he is. For a global leader to be able to say, hi, Gift, I read your story, and to calm my nerves was something that was extraordinary. And the lesson for me, really, and the other young people globally who are inspired by President Obama, it showed to me without any doubt, as a son of a domestic worker, that the world is full of possibilities, that the world is opening up for our generation, because we used to trap ourselves to say, how do we open the future? Because in the African continent, the present is holding the future in suffocation. But we got warm welcome in a global platform. We got represented. It motivated me, motivated a million of young people in my country. Everyone in my country was happy, people that I work with, and more important, in my political organization, my president, and so forth, for us to share our story became a very important platform for me, and a lesson, to young people that we can do it, that our background does not define our destiny. Because when people like myself, whom we thought history had relegated us out of this particular, important national, international platform to be given, that was a great honor, to share my story and to learn from President Obama.
That's very great and very inspiring for, I'm sure, many young people in Africa, but not only, who dream to lead like you and like other leaders who are making changing already in the world. You defined yourself also as a man of ideas. Is there a particular quote from another man or woman of ideas that has inspired you on your journey to leadership?
Yeah, thank you very much. One of the people that has inspired me is President Nelson Mandela, the former president of South Africa, who preached the idea of creating a society that all men can live together, black, white, were able to live together, and that's the democracy that them as the liberation heroes were fighting for. This statement inspired me, as a young person growing up, because one of the most important things in our country was, how do we deal with these tribal diversities after there was a genocide against the Ndebele-speaking minority group, which I belong to. But to be able to say, as a young person, I'm able to grow up, be in leadership, but also be able to tolerate and build a society where we're able to forgive, where we're able to deal with our past injustices and build a society that we can all live together. It doesn't just end only in Zimbabwe. I have been involved in the campaigns against xenophobia in South Africa and the different parts of Africa. That is, African brothers and sisters, we are one people. How do we make sure that we bring collaboration together as an African continent? And more importantly, as democrats across the world, how do we, particularly at this time where there's democratic backsliding, how do we come together as world leaders to make sure that we speak truth to power and reignite the audacious hope that democracy brings to our society? So for me, these are important lessons, and the quotation from Mandela speak to me not just as a Zimbabwean, not just as an African, but as a citizen of the world, to say, how do we build a globe where every citizen of the world can be able to live, tolerate, and cooperate together, regardless of our race, regardless of our tribe, regardless of our age. Most of times in the African continent, you get relegated out of politics on the basis of age, that young people can lead are the leaders of tomorrow, not today. So how to build a society that is able to resolve these vices, that is able to respect the rights of every citizen in the world? So for me, that inspires me. For me, that speaks a lot to my work and what I think that the future holds.
And one of the hottest topics being discussed today is that of mental health. You said in your speech to the Democracy Forum that you'd use the power of ideas and the beauty of language to speak on behalf of the oppressed people of Africa. And I quote, "I decided that in spite of my youth, I would use my abilities, knowledge, and conviction to speak truth to power. If we use our voice, we can find our power, and with our power, we can change the world." That is very beautifully said by you. So would you like to share your views on the importance of speaking openly about mental health? Could you share some of the ways you keep your own physical and mental health in balance?
Thank you very much. Yeah, I have made sure that from all my trainings, I do a lot of work to try and encourage other young people, because what happens being in politics, not just in the African continent, is that working with the public is so demanding. There's its own ups and downs and its own booms, particularly some of the toxicity that we find in our politics. So one of the most important things that I've encouraged young people is that we take time to say there are specific days where we take off, participating in public affairs as an important first thing. That I encourage young people that you have to take a day, because most of the time when you've got a calling of leadership, you want to commit to the struggle 24 hours a day, 72 hours, and an entire week. But there must be a time where you can take few hours break and read a book which is non-political as an important therapeutic work, so that you heal. Number two, I think that the most important thing that we have trained some of our activists, and something that I advocate for, is for people and leaders across the world to be eating healthy. The United Nations has raised caution about male, figures dying because of depression and mental health problems. So it's one of the things that we've advocated for, so that people can be able to live healthy, people can be able to drink water as much as we can, rather than taking, some of the fizzy drinks that causes a lot of health problems to us as young people. Number three is the idea of exercising. I believe that is important, and I encourage young people and everyone in the world to keep exercising, and we encourage each other, because when we are in positions of authority, we must be able to help our people, teach our people. What COVID has taught us as the invisible global enemy is that health is the most important thing. We must invest in health. That's why as public officials, we invest in making sure that our policies are pro-health, so that we're able to put more budget into health, because a healthy nation is a wealthy nation. So we must invest in health of our people. We must invest in the health of ordinary people, so that we provide support systems for the ordinary people in our society. And that, for me, helps. Last is obviously the issues of always seeking, social cycle support. We think that is important for activists, because especially in our case, I stayed in prison when Zimbabwe was led by Mr. Mugabe for more than 38 years. I was in prison and in detention, and stayed there for almost 119 days. And one of the lessons is that how do you deal with post-arrest to make sure that we deal with issues of mental health. So social support is something that I think is very important.
And as a role model for young Africans, what advice would you give to the young men and women in the continent of Africa who are fighting for their dreams of education and their dreams of a better future?
My words to young people in the African continent, and of course the world, is that number one, your voice is your power. Never never allow anyone to take away your voice, because what makes us human is the coherent articulation of issues through the beauty of language. What makes me different from a dog is the ability to articulate my own story and my own issues. So I believe that young people must be able to speak out, because their voice is their power. Number two, I think that I encourage young people across the entire African continent to be counted, to be able to organize and not agonize, because most of African young people don't want to participate in their civic duties to choose leaders of their choice. So I believe that young people must be able to understand that the liberation struggle in the African continent was through the power of the gun, but the democratic and transformation struggle comes through the power of the ballot. So we have transferred from the power of the bullet to the power of the ballot. So young people must be able to participate in the civic affairs of their own countries so that they collectively choose leaders that are able to speak to their conscious and material needs. So I encourage young people across the African continent to speak out and be counted, to organize and participate, but more importantly, young people across the African continent to come together so that we open the future whom the present is holding in suffocation.
I thank you from the bottom of my heart for being with us today, Gift. I look forward to seeing your leadership grow, and I know you will make a positive impact on your community and your country in the future. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure having you here.
Thank you very much for having me too.